I've been a physician for 31 years, and nutrition is the foundation of my practice. In this video, I hope to provide simple and easy actionable steps to have a healthier tomorrow. I've been studying nutrition for over 40 years and applying it in my personal life so that I can feel better and live longer. There have been changes over the years because there's new information and new science. By the end of this video, you're going to be left with why the United States is in a serious health crisis and why nutrition plays a role in that, the role of nutrition in health and medicine in my practice, and I'm also going to leave you very practical tips of do's and don'ts that you can action today for a healthier tomorrow. Let's talk about the current guidelines and where those came from just for a brief moment, because I think it's important to put this in a historical context so that we can understand why the health of Americans is suffering today. We are living shorter lives and we have more chronic disease than ever before. When I first went into practice, I told my patients that were newly diagnosed with diabetes that 60% of all those individuals could make lifestyle changes and actually never have to go on medication. And that is still true today. So in the 1970s, there was a shift in agricultural policy that was largely driven by politics. There's a very interesting historical and political rationale for the changes that were made in food policy and the dietary guidelines in the United States, which actually led to the first food pyramid. So I won't get into the details, but if you're interested, there's a book called Food Fiat, and it outlines the details of the United States going off the gold standard under Richard Nixon and rampant inflation, and the need to provide food for the American public in a much cheaper way because prices were rising for the very expensive foods like meat and eggs and butter, and the cheap foods that were being produced were grains. So that included wheat, corn, soybeans. Basically, the policy was fence row to fence row, which meant the farmers were going to start growing as many grains as they could.
By calling upon American farmers to plant fence row to fence row. And he told them to get big or get out. Producers took his words to heart, and the race to feed the world was on.
The shift in dietary habits led to larger consumption of seed and vegetable oils, larger consumption of grains, and moving away from meat, eggs, and butter, and also moving away from the traditional fats like lard and other things. This has led to many of the health effects that we're seeing today, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, kidney disease, and a variety of other things, including fatty liver disease, which is actually in epidemic proportions. If you look at the trends from the 1980s to today, actually the increase in diabetes is 400%. When I first went into practice, we called it adult onset diabetes. We don't call it that anymore because the age of onset of diabetes is much younger. One of the results of diabetes is a condition called fatty liver disease. And we're seeing an epidemic of fatty liver disease in the United States population. It occurs in about 30 to 40% of the adult population, and now kids make up about 20 to 25% of the population with fatty liver disease. The shift to consume more of these products, including processed and ultra-processed foods, has led to the decline of the health of Americans today. It's very unfortunate. There's a lot of misinformation out there about proper diet, and I think some of this comes from just lack of education, and also some of it comes from marketing. So companies are trying to sell you products and they're not necessarily interested in your health. So with some simple changes that we can make, as I'll discuss later in the video, you can actually put yourself on a different course with regards to your health, wellness, and longevity. One of the foundational tools that I use with all of my patients is healthy nutrition, and I'll get into the details of what that looks like. The current recommendations are to actually flip the food pyramid upside down, and I've actually been saying that for several years because it never made sense that we're supposed to eat 6 to 11 servings of grains per day. That is an excess. That's too many carbohydrates, lots of problems there. The base of the pyramid really should be the healthy meats, eggs, butter, all of those good things, along with multiple vegetables consumed throughout the day. My recommendation for most of my patients is what I call plant heavy paleo. The largest portion of the plate should be vegetables. And then you should have a small amount of meat, 3 to 4 ounces. You do not need to eat excessive amounts of meat. You may include maybe 20 to 25% of the plate occupied by a starch or a grain. This is a very healthy diet for most people. People that have underlying conditions, we have to be more specific with how much grains and carbohydrates they can eat, but that's really the base for most of the individuals that I see that's gonna create long-term health. So let's take a look at what that plate looks like and sourcing of these foods. So when I say vegetables, that could be a variety of vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables like kale, broccoli, cauliflower, those are readily available. Carrots, pretty much all the vegetables that are out there could be consumed. The one thing I would be careful of is things like squash and root vegetables do have a higher carbohydrate content. So when you're mixing your vegetables, you can have a small portion of that, but don't consume excessive amounts of those types of vegetables because of the carbohydrate content. With regards to meat, you can eat full fat meat. That's not a problem because that's where all the fat soluble nutrients live. Where do we get vitamin A, D, E, and K, plus coenzyme Q10 and a variety of other fat soluble vitamins? It's in the fat. And this moving away from those animal fats has actually led to a deficiency of nutrients because we're not consuming those. And so I see nutritional deficiencies in my patients all the time. So sourcing your meat is very important. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. With regards to the grains, my recommendation is some people do better on a gluten-free diet, but some people can tolerate wheat. The best way to consume wheat and other grains is if it's fermented. It makes it more digestible in the GI tract of humans. With regards to other grains, I would say small amounts of other grains like quinoa, rice, barley, buckwheat, and things like that could be consumed in smaller quantities. So with regards to root vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes, those are fine to consume, but just make sure it's a smaller portion on your plate. I prefer sweet potatoes because they actually have more beta carotene in them. That's what gives them that yellow color. So a little more nutritious than a white potato. I source everything locally as much as I can. I've been going to farmers markets for 35 plus years. Every city I've ever lived in, I discover where the closest farmer market is, and I go and find one in your area. They're all over the place. And then meet your farmer and get to know your farmers. You're looking for somebody who's raising their animals without hormones, antibiotics, and also is feeding their animals, especially cows, on grass. The question you need to ask is it 100% grass-fed, and is it 100% grass-finished? Because often what farmers will do is they'll keep their cows on pasture, and the last 3 to 6 months, they'll actually start feeding them corn. Cows are ruminants. What does that mean? They have 4 stomachs. They're not meant to eat corn. They are not corn eaters. What happens to a cow when it eats corn? That starts the marbling process because of all the sugar, the fructose that's in the corn actually creates insulin resistance and prediabetes in these cows, which causes fat deposition within the animal, and that causes the marbling. So you want to make sure that you get 100% grass-fed and grass-finished. That's going to be a leaner cut, but you're still going to get fat in there, and that's where all those good nutrients are. In the winter, you can also obtain a variety of vegetables. I was at the market last Saturday, middle of February. I was able to buy spinach, kale, carrots, mushrooms, and a variety of other root vegetables that they've stored, as well as squash, apples, and other things that are available here in Indiana. So we have an abundance of locally produced, locally grown products that are available to everyone that wants to go consume those. So I understand that there may be some financial barriers to eating locally, eating organic, eating 100% grass-fed beef and other animal products. The nutrient density of those foods, especially grass-fed and grass-finished beef, is so high. When you look at the nutrient content, you don't need to eat that much. So what we have to do is we have to really scale back the volume that we're consuming. So for instance, I was actually at Costco just looking around, and ground beef in Costco was about $6 a pound, and ground beef that's grass-fed, grass-finished that I purchase is $10 a pound. There is a price differential. What I tell people is we don't really need that much of that meat because it's so nutrient dense. So make sure you buy the nutrient dense food, and you can eat less of it, get more nutrition, and feel better. One thing I want to leave you with is actionable steps. What are the things that we can eliminate today that make the most sense from a dietary and health perspective? What's the first thing you need to do? You need to learn how to read a food label, because there's a lot of hidden things in that product, in those processed foods, that you should not be consuming. Make sure you read your labels and understand what you're actually putting into your body. The biggest thing that you can eliminate is something called high fructose corn syrup. If you just look at any processed food, it's sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. It's everywhere. And this is to be avoided at all costs. It's one of the biggest contributors to fatty liver disease, which is an epidemic in the United States right now. And unchecked, that can lead to cirrhosis and death. So high fructose corn syrup needs to be taken out of the American diet, period. Second thing I want to leave you with is make sure you get seed oils out of your life. Corn, soybean, canola, all the seed oils are actually contributing to the demise of our health. So the seed oils actually induce a state of metabolism in the body called torpor. What is torpor? That's what bears do when they hibernate in the winter. So they actually slow their metabolism down, heart rate slows down, respiratory rate slows down, thyroid function slows down, metabolism slows down, so they can get through the long winter and not eat anything. So these seed oils are actually contributing to this state of lower metabolic function. So get them out of your life. So what do you replace it with? Tallow, butter, lard, olive oil, coconut oil. Those are the oils that we should be consuming. That's what our ancestors consumed. And once we saw the introduction of these seed oils into our diet, along with a heavy grain diet in the 1970s, that's when we started to see the decline in the United States health and a rise in chronic disease, which we see today. The third actionable step would be to get rid of processed and ultra-processed foods. So basically these ready-to-eat meals and things like that just need to get out of your diet. We need to focus on whole foods, vegetables, meat, whole grains, things like that. But we need to get away from those processed foods because they have a lot of hidden ingredients that we should not be consuming. If you look at a label and you don't understand what this chemical compound is, you probably shouldn't be eating that. You need to know where that food came from. So I always tell people, if you can't recognize something in the grocery store, you probably shouldn't be eating it. I've never seen a ding dong growing on a tree. You know, you recognize oranges and apples and things like that. We should really be able to look at our food, know where it came from, and know what we're consuming, because that's what really we're intended to eat for health and nutrition. When I first became interested in nutrition, I didn't realize that there were some nutrient deficiencies that one might need to supplement with. In my practice, I measure nutrient levels both in the blood but also inside of the cells, and that gives me an idea of long-term nutrition for individuals. And over the past several years, I've tested thousands of people and realized that there are significant deficiencies that exist within the American population. So it does become necessary sometimes to support and supplement with certain nutrients that we might be deficient in. One example is magnesium. Close to 100% of all Americans who are not supplementing with magnesium are deficient. Why? We've grown crops in the same soil year after year, not replacing magnesium. That is just one example of nutrients that would actually benefit us. And when I talked about diabetes early on, I said that 60% of all my patients, if they followed lifestyle measures, would likely never have to go on medication. Other things have come along that have good science to support it, like berberine, chromium, vanadium, things like that, that actually will help one overcome their predisposition to diabetes. So good nutrition is very important, but it also may require some supplementing with additional nutrients to help us achieve the life and longevity that we all seek. I've developed a number of protocols over the years with lots of experience and lots of data points to help my patients achieve the health that they desire. And if you have any interest in learning more about the protocols, you can find these protocols on our website at theloganinstitute.org. Hi, thanks for watching the video today. When I have time, I love to make these videos because I love to educate about health and wellness. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure and subscribe, and maybe check out this next video. YouTube thinks you're gonna like this one. If you have any questions you'd like me or my team to answer, please leave them in the comment section below. See you in the next one.